Greetings, Summoners. Cosmic here, and welcome back to another Battle Spirit Saga video. And today we're going to be talking about the list that I took to a top 16 finish just this past weekend in Monoroeville and had a ton of fun playing it. For those that don't know, I've been really loving the Armor Tree style of deck in set 2, and while I haven't done a video on it for the channel yet, it's something that I've tweeted about it, I've talked about in the community Discord quite a bit, shared it in the Facebook group. Like, I just really love that style of deck, and it was putting up at least good local results. However, I do have to give a shout out then to Dorian, who made this list, or a style of this list, into top 32 of Tulsa, and this is just another evolution on their deck. So it's been kind of going in this circle of like green ramp Swift stuff that a couple people have been working on, had just missed top cuts in all these various events, but it is a ton of fun to play, and I think that there is something there. And I did technically change 2 cards from this list, one less Beldegor and one more Joker in the sideboard with like the key changes. But overall, like if I was going to play this tomorrow, I would definitely just play it again. It is a ton of fun. You get to ramp stuff. Worker Ant-Man is just an absolutely absurd of a card, and I'm sure you've been playing set 2 at all. It's great. And yes, it is primarily a green deck that I'll say, but there's like 6 key green cards I think make this all come together and something you'd want to play even going forward. But yes, there are some considerations that we have to at least acknowledge in the format as a whole and kind of how we got here. But ultimately, the key plan was just trying to ramp early on with Worker Ant-Man, or even Butterfly being a 5k attacker can be really good. We have the Beldegor triggers to come back, or the Swift targets, and then the Airborne Crag Nexus makes sure that they're going to be 4K, so they can't just Burning Force us, right? So we're always able to do extra things in combat, or if our opponent just attacks with one guy, we just Thorn Prison them, right? Like, that is the one thing that green is really, really great at in this set, is that things like Thorn Prison, things like being able to Swift in spirits when you aren't, opponent's not expecting it, especially in like the Armor Tree list when you flash in Emerald Pincer, is crazy strong. It really is, just to have that massive swing. And then it goes to, okay, they now absolutely have to have an Ice Shield on their side, or something like a Suppression too. I think Suppression in general is probably going to see a lot more play here in the near future, but it always just forces them to have an answer. And I played against 4 Axebiters in my Swiss, and I went 3-1 against them. And the one I lost, I just like super bricked against it. So I'm not going to call this like an anti-Axebiter list. I don't think it is by any means. I think there are lines that you can take that give you an advantage. And then obviously your sideboard helps out a lot. But I did feel pretty good going 3-1 into Axebiter lists over the weekend. I got to be pretty honest, because there was just so much of it. The other side I'll say, of course, is if I would have found red decks, I got the Dodge red all through Swiss, which was great, I probably wouldn't have had a great time. Elephant helps us a little bit, but there are some other key pieces that we're missing, in our green spirits generally just are weaker, right? So we can't really do much battle tricks, and things like the Shrike don't get as much value. But with that all the way, and I kind of already hinted at it, but let's talk about the elephant in the room, right? So Axebiter, the elephant itself is just a great enabler for this style of deck. I think, in a world, let's just pretend Depths is banned. Let's pretend Axebiter's not that big of an issue. Durham Dynamo, we maybe don't have to run. But still, in this style of deck, because you have all the ramp, because you want to be able to refresh your cores, I think you're just always going to be playing Elephant. It's a 10k attacker. It draws you cards. It ramps you cards. It really does do everything that you want it to do. However, I will make no, admission of the fact that I won so many games just off the back of Durham Dyna, because my opponent was on Axebiter and they're just holding all these dead suppressions or infinity shields, right? And also because we're already playing Elephant, because of how this deck naturally wants to play out, we're generally going to have 2+ unblockables every single turn, because Elephants stick on the board. Durham Dyna can stick on the board very easily, and when you're ramping all these cores as well, you can usually get out of core theft range pretty easily, because you burn down your opponent's resources early on with your Thorn Prisons, with your Dream Bonds, and things of that nature. So there is a world where I would really like to see some green boss monster kind of take the role. I think if you were to maybe shift some of these Swift targets out so you could hit more 4Ks, I think Elzamoth could still be good in this slot. But overall, just from what was a proper meta call and what you kind of just have to do in this meta, right? Elzamoth is really nice, but if your opponent still has suppression, they're still going to suppression you out. It doesn't matter if they, axe and your guy doesn't die with Elzamoth, right? Because you can attack first and make sure it's 9k. You still have to deal with it. Okay, that bought them an extra turn, where Durham Dyna is always going to be, no, you have to have X, Y, or Z answer exactly, or you're dead this turn. So that is the one consideration that I'll make, that yes, Elephant's always going to be good. I picked up my 4 alt arts because I think that card's just always going to be good with green. And then Durham Dyna, I hope there's a world at some point where we see less of him, and there's some new cool thing that we can do in white, both for this list and other white lists. But at least I think where the format is at today, it's no surprise that Durham Dyna is just that guy in the format and really being an MVP all weekend long. To be totally fair, if you saw the stream or if you were just at the event and saw some of these decks going, I mean, there were so many times where it's like, Derm for game, all right, because that unblockable effect is just so strong. But with those out of the way, and, this little disclaimer up front, let's talk about the other kind of key pieces for and what really brings this deck together. So Worker Ant-Man, I think by now, going all the way back to Gen Con, we really saw how much power was in this card. But in this deck in particular, because we do have the 4 Thorn Prison and we have 3 Dream Bombs as well, this really is just stick the Worker Ant-Man, try to always ramp and stay at core parity with your opponent, right? Because you ramp one, they take a damage. You're both even. As long as you keep acting on that plan, and then you eventually find a room where you bounce their Axebiter and they try a suppression, you're going to be able to close out the game very fast. Because this is a 4K body, you are able to constantly dodge things like the Burning Force that so many decks are running right now. And then the other one with the Heaven's Cloak Butterfly, it is just a when summon ramp a core. There's 2 reasons. One, this goes up to 5K, which can be really nice for attacking and comboing with Strike, to where you can trade for something that's at 7K, which is like a nice number to hit. Then also it's just a 4K for Beldegor itself when you want extra attacks with Beldegor. So Beldegor itself, if you caught the stream, I was on the round 1 feature match. It did come into play. Even if I paid the cost of it wrong, I didn't pay off the depths instead of paying for my reserve. So I could have done like Beldegor into Scoops into like 3 more attackers that I would have actually had in that turn. So it was like a 7-turn multi-attack insanity that I was able to string together. But then I forgot to pay the cores off the depths and I didn't get to do it. But I won that anyways because my opponent was just taxed out of resources at that point. And that's really, again, what this deck is good at. You need those extra cores, and you want a body that can stick on the board and just start swinging, that your opponent constantly has to think about what you might want to do because of the cores that you have in your reserve. And I really got to stress again for Worker Ant-Man, there are so many times, like, if this just gets a 2 or 3 core advantage while you're attacking your opponent down, chances are you win the game unless you brick. Like, there were so many times I felt so bad. My opponents just felt like and there were some rounds I did high roll. Don't get me wrong, but there was turns where it's like I'm just holding on Thorn Prison and Dream Bomb, where I'm waiting until a turn where I can have a multi-attack, and Worker Ant-Man gives me exactly the extra core I need to play the Thorn Prison and then also account for like Beldegor coming back, right? So this is one of those decks you actually have to think about the proper sequencing on Worker Ant-Man and how many cores you're getting on like 2 or 3 turns ahead. But that's exactly what it does. And because I was playing the Armor Tree variant for so long, and because I have been familiar with how this deck wants to kind of pilot it out, like as long as you see that Worker Ant-Man early, you are feeling so great. And there's also just so many great Swift targets that we can kind of play off of it, which is the key part of this that we want to talk about, right? So since we're talking about Worker Ant-Man, I got to give it to Shrike. I did put up 1 more copy of this in the main deck, so I went down 1 Beldegor, up 1 Shrike, because I kind of forgot how insane it was, but there's so many lines and so many turns where you can push your opponent into, let's say, an Axebiter, where you bounce it, they have to replay it, and then they try to suppression their Axebiter, and then your Worker Ant-Man, when combined with Shrike, is now saying, okay, we're going to shrink it, we're going to trade, I've already ramped my core, and now I'm still hitting you for 4K anyways. So I really like the tempo that this deck can enable pretty easily, and it reminds me a lot too of shout out to Zach Bell's championship list from the last, or I guess the time we were recording this 2 Grand Opens ago now, right? Where it kind of had that similar feel where you just want to have those Thorn Prisons, you just want to have those turns where you have the Dream Bomb or have the magic to make them really get set back a turn, that you're always ramping cores, you're always drawing cards and finding more answers. So there is a case here where I'd like to see Rotting Swamp in the list at some point. I'm going to have to try and figure out what this looks like for the Pro Tour, but I'm going to be perfectly honest, if depths get banned, I'm like 99.9% sure this is my list for the Pro Tour, because I think Tokiwa is going to be insane for this style of deck. But of course, the real MVP that kind of brings it all together is Mr. Scoops, or Scoopowl himself, right? So it's a 4-cost Swift. When it dies, their opponent has to exhaust one of their refreshed spirits. So it's basically just Needle Shot, or it's Gale 1, or however you want to word it. And one of the biggest mistakes that I personally made all weekend, there were so many times where I had tunnel vision on trying to save it for a defensive play that would then allow me to go into like a Beldegor and then like do a crackback, where a lot of times, and also to get the airborne crag effect, right? So it gets out of Burning Force range, but as I found out by like round 6, round 7. So, by the way, and this isn't meant to be like a humble brag or anything, this is just strictly transparency. I did not play test this version of this list at all leading up to Monoroeville. I just didn't have time because I was working on videos. The stuff happened at work and all this other stuff. So like I literally played 0 games of this, sleeved it up, but it was close enough to my armor tree list that it didn't feel foreign or anything. But Scoops, as I found out, because again, this is the mistake as I was learning the deck at the event, you just want to jam this on the board sometimes, right? Because it's going to take a Gale 1 effectively, where again, you attack, your opponent either takes a life and they're low, or they block, Scoops always dies, and then you tap something else of theirs, and now your Worker Ant-Man or other cards that you care about more, like surviving, are still ramping you stuff, or your Aldid is still going to ramp you a core and be 6k, right? So there's other lines that this opens that wasn't kind of initially apparent to me, where I was so used to Armor Tree just being very defensively, where this one can be more tempo focused and really be aggressive, right? In Armor Tree, you have to wait for those turns where you get like Emerald Pincer. Armor Tree is always attacking. It's a 9k, whatever, right? But there are other turns we have to line up like Emirate Man and Emerald Pincer, tap down their guy, and then you untap and then slam down a bunch of guys and swing again, right? So Scoops, I gotta say, truly the greatest, as it were. And then Leaf Wolf, I mean, this card is no surprise. We've seen it in the green aggro. Shout out to Tim's list from top 8 of Tulsa. Leaf Wolf is just Leaf Wolf. And of course, Zach had the one of as well. Like, there are games where you just need to extend your damage. And I'll be honest, it didn't come up nearly as much as I kind of wanted it to. And this entire weekend, I didn't get to Beldegor a Worker Ant-Man, which broke my heart. But there were a couple turns where I flashed in Leaf Wolf and killed their Worker Ant-Man just so I could not have to play the ramp race back and forth, right? And, you know, other times it is just meant to be a flash blocker where your opponent thinks they're going to be able to swing for that 1 damage that they really need, and then Leaf Wolf can come down. And again, because you're playing Airborne Crag, it very easily gets out of Burning Force range, and it's not too hard if you guys have 2 of them, right, to make this a very scary mid-game blocker or late-game blocker, too, if it goes long enough. So there is some consideration there for, like, maybe a 3rd Airborne Crag if you get really spicy with it. We see more Swift, but I do think 2 is the kind of key number there. And then, of course, Beldegor, and I already talked about Aldid, so we'll just jump into that right away. This is something that I changed from the list as well. I really just wanted, another 5-drop Spirit that I wanted to play. We are very Spirit heavy in this list. When it comes into play, you get to exhaust something. Of course, if you have Netherworld Depths, you're drawing a card. If you have a Beldegor play, it acts as removal with the Emerald Greatbird into Beldegor. It ramps when you attack. It really just does a lot, right, for what you want it to be doing. And there are turns where you just like get to curve out Worker Ant-Man, Butterfly, Aldid, Cell Chip and damage, ramp 2 cores. And now you just gave yourself enough cores to be able to Thorn Prison. So your opponent's already on the back foot. Even if they have a full board and are able to slam something back on that first attack, you go, all right, sorry, Thorn Prison, lose your other 2, and now you don't have any blockers, and I won quite a few games that way. Or in that same scenario, right, if there was a Leaf Wolf, because it is a 2-cost 1 and 1 reduction, there are many times where I would have been able to Swift in a Leaf Wolf, get a block, stabilize, and then do the crackback on the next turn, right? There's a lot of different avenues for that. And then, of course, just Beldegor being Beldegor himself, right? Removing a 3 and 4 cost is really strong because we're playing things like Thorn Prison. We can line up what we're removing. Unfortunately, because I played so much Axebiter this weekend, Beldegor basically got cut or went all the way down to 1 copy later on anyways. I think you always leave in 1 copy, period, just because of how it can line up with your multi-attacks, and that's still important. But a lot of times it's just super dead, truthfully, right? And there was actually one of the Axebiter lists that, like, they didn't show it game 1, but they had Worker Ant-Mans as well, and I was just like, all right, well, I should have left in the Beldegors, I guess, because those are really annoying to deal with. But we were able to just get there with the strikes and other things, all things considered. So that was really good. And again, I think Beldegor is something that I don't love in the list, but you are playing enough 4 and 5 drops to make it a very strong consideration, as well as the fact that it can help multi-attack turns, and it easily gets out of range with Burning Force because of Crag. So I think there's still enough considerations for it. It's just, you know, are we expecting to see an aggro meta where it can, you know, really shine? Or there are a lot of times where it's just like, wow, I wish the Beldegors were just like jokers, right, or something. And that could just be, I played a lot of Axe, the format itself is more control focused, right? There's a couple considerations there, but that is kind of just matchup lotto as you're going through it, where Beldegor is either going to be an MVP or something you don't care about seeing. But there are times too where it's just a free attacker when you have Netherworld Depths online and then you're drawing cards, like, go ahead, block and kill my Beldegor, I don't care, it's gonna come back, right? It goes to the trash. You drew a card anyways. That's totally fine. So there's a lot of different considerations for it. I think Beldegor is still one of those, like, absolutely have to play like unknown meta sort of things. But if you're going into a meta where you have a better expectation of it, where I think literally half the field was Axebiter, then maybe this should have just been like all the way fallen back to a 2 of and maybe freed up another spot for a 4th copy of Dream Bomb, to be perfectly honest. Like, I know Dream Bomb's good, but I was really worried about how expensive it was going to be. But unless you like double whiff on your ramp, you're always going to have cores for Dream Bomb to line it up the way that you want it to and set your opponent back. So that's also a consideration. Maybe if we wanted to go 1 less Beldegor, 1 more Dream Bomb, I might change that as well. But 4 is an insane number to run, all things considered. But we got the cores for it, and it's a very strong play, so why not? And then, of course, I referenced it enough, so why not talk about it here right at the end, the Airborne Crag. Here's the thing. Green doesn't get good Nexus cards. We're just not allowed to, apparently. I was kind of looking back at Japanese Battle Spirits just to try to get an idea of like what else might we get sort of thing. And there's like the Fruit of Life and Tree of Life. I think are like the 2 cards that are like, oh, you get to ramp and draw when your opponent hits you sort of thing. Like, we're obviously not going to get that anytime soon, I don't think. But this one did surprise me quite a bit, right? So obviously the level 1 for 0 cores, make your guys not get hit by Burning Force. It won me the game on stream. It won me a couple different games over the course of these Swiss rounds. It's just good. Like, it's just fine. And you want green reduction on board anyways. Like, that is one of the hard things about this deck, that I would have just got absolutely soul crushed a lot of times by Cursed Combo if I played into it. Now, again, there are ways where it's like, oh, you have 2 cores and everything. You just save it for the Swift, right? So you have ways to play around it. But if someone is able to get a board wipe style on you when you only have, 1 or 0 Nexus cards, it can be really difficult to come back with unless one of your elephants died already, getting extra cores and cards, which can be really nice. But not to be missed too is the level 2 effect, refresh any of your spirits with a soul core on them. So in some early games, what ends up happening is you get a Worker Ant-Man, you swing with it against purple, they're not going to have an immediate answer, you ramped 1 core, and then it stands itself back up, so it dodges a lot of what they want to be doing. So again, I think that one's kind of more matchup dependent, but at the same time, it does allow you to establish blockers, which can be really important, again, because sometimes you just need to have a blocker into Thorn Prison to crack back and win the game. Like, there were some crazy fast games that we ended up playing with this deck over the weekend that I really want to stress that you can go watch the round 1 feature match. Game 1, we saw all the aggro tempo side, crushed it, ran right through. Obviously, like a little bit of a high roll, all things considered, but we got the ramp, we got the draw, we got the tap down. Perfect, right? That's just how crazy green can open. And then in game 2, I think my hand was like double depths, Worker Ant-Man, Ice Shield or something like that, right? And I was like, all right, I saw they were playing purple and stuff. I know the game's going to go long. I'm going to keep the 2 depths because why not? It is that card. And it ended up carrying me out, even though, they had the Burning Forest, but then I eventually drew into the 3rd Netherworld depths, and it won me the game on the spot. So that's kind of the other thing. If you know that your opponent's going to be on a slower matchup anyways, sometimes it's just like double depths or even like triple depths Worker Ant-Man. Now, that's definitely a bit greedy, don't get me wrong, but because of how the deck lends itself and because you're going to draw those 2 extra cards off the top and most likely draw into a spirit because of how spirit heavy we are, it's probably totally fine, right? Like, that's how greedy the plays can end up being because you are getting all of that ramp. Or again, probably just more fair. It's like double depths, Worker Ant-Man, Aldeed or something, right? Just so you have some to clear the way for Ant-Man as well as ramp another core and get to 6k if you really want to. And I think I forgot to mention it, but the other important part about Aldeed is that it's a 6k that ramps you and forces your opponent to have a suppression to remove it if you have another roll depths. Otherwise, I get to ramp a core and draw a card, and it just bounces off your Axebiter, and that's totally fine. So definitely something to consider. And with that, that is our top 16 list. Really wish I could have snuck into top 8, but it wasn't in the cards for me this time. But again, I love this list. I've had nothing but a fun time playing green in set 2. I think it's absolutely a treat that I think more people should check out if you can, and especially in that more heavy green focused list, because Swift is quite strong. Now, again, now that the jig is up and more people know what to expect out of these lists, I think it does lose a little bit of that surprise power. But again, at the end of the day, any deck running a combination of Thorn Prison and Dream Bombs is absurdly strong in the format right now. So might as well play the one that can play Thorn Prison for even cheaper and ramp you into Dream Bombs. Like, I had a lot of fun with this list, and then this, again, quite seriously, is most likely what I'm playing in the European Pro Tour, because I think Tokiwa is going to be absolutely beyond cracked for this list. So that is my kind of insider knowledge, as it were. It just we'll see how it goes in testing, but I think that Tokiwa is just going to really put this deck into a very, very good spot, assuming we see some changes in October. So With that, I definitely say give it a try at your locals. Once again, the lore set does drop at the end of this month, so you can go pick up your Tokiwa and the other cards you might be looking forward to. But otherwise, there's going to be a lot more coverage coming soon out of the Monoroeville event. There's a yellow-purple, really cool combo deck that popped up, and they lost their winning in for top 8, which breaks my heart because the deck is seriously so Giga Brain. I feel like I'm playing this game completely wrong. Like, they had the most insane run, and there's so many just seriously beyond big brain things that they pulled off. I watched one of their games and my jaw was just on the floor the entire time watching them come back from it. So definitely look forward to that one because they're just better, way better at this game than ever I could ever hope to be. And huge kudos to Bryce for that list. And I'll have that up like Tuesday or Wednesday probably this week. And then tomorrow we'll have the top 8 breakdown, which is literally 3 different decks, if I remember correctly, in top 8 because it was teammates who all shared lists and all that good stuff. But, we'll try to get that video out as well. So with that, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.